Hi guys and welcome to another recap video. This time round number 1 of the Austrian Bundesliga. And my opponent was Grandmaster Krivoborodov from Germany. And I want to show two sections of this game because this game was a very long game. I want to share with you the two most important and most instructive moments. So the first thing I'm talking about is the opening phase, and the game started off here with the nowadays sometimes quite hyped JOBAVA London. So the London system with knight c3, quite aggressive, but if black knows the right countermeasures, he faces no problems. And yeah, I had a very safe option to counter it ready. So I played c5 here, and the first thing you need to know is that you don't need to be scared at all of knight b5 at this stage. Actually, knight b5 is just a bad move because it runs into queen a5. The knight is not yet protected, thus the knight must go back and white just lost time. So not at this point. So e3 is the usual move. And after that, I would recommend to take the pawn on d4. And if they recapture, what they usually do, you just play a6, taking all kind of knight b5 out of the position. This is now necessary because the knight would already be protected on b5 by this bishop. So black needed to watch out for this. Also, another thing you need to know is that knight b5 immediately is just bad, and you don't need to play knight to a6, but instead you can play queen a5 and all the stuff with forcing some capture so that white can finally hop in here. It's just bad for white. Black is sacrificing something but actually has a winning position here. Everybody who is interested in that one can dive deeper on their own. There are two winning moves here, e5 or c2. And black's activity counts more. The c2 pawn is very strong. The knight is always basically lost, and black has, not just counterplay, but basically a winning position. So you should be aware of that white cannot play like this. White has another option, and that's actually what he went for in the game, which is quite aggressive. White is saying, okay, I have developed two pieces, black has just developed one piece, and thus he wants to open the center as quickly as possible with e4. And well, this is very sharp, and this can be very dangerous if you're unprepared. But I want to show you one very straightforward and very safe solution against this, which is knight takes e4. After knight takes e4, black basically threatens to take on c3 as well, and then there is no danger left. So basically what they all do is takes, and now they usually take on c5 as well because they are pawn down, and a pawn is a pawn. They shouldn't play around too much. d5, it's not really intimidating. There is no knight coming to b5 any longer. That's why I actually really like this knight e4, because it's trading off this kind of dangerous knight, and here black could just develop with g6, for example. So this is not dangerous. So usually they don't have options, so they always go for this, and now we just go for the very simple queen a5 check. They always block the check, and we take this pawn, and then white is supposed to take the pawn on e4. But all those complications which I mentioned in the beginning, they are already gone after this very short sequence of accurate moves by black, and there is not so much danger coming up. I had quite a decent middle game here, which we will go through quickly and then have a look at the end game. So they follow bishop to f5, queen c4. I took some center, and I stabilized the center, traded queens, stabilized the center more, and hide my king away here. Challenge some central files, and finally gave up the bishop pair, but got some good activity with rook d5 in return. My knight is not bad, my bishop on e6 is also good, and I will also maybe be the first to take over the d file. And actually I got some initiative here after rook d5 and then rook d8, because now I have a threat in the position. My threat is to go rook to d2, hitting the bishop and hitting also at the same time this pawn on a2. So he was a bit concerned about it. And of course he could try to neutralize all of my rooks, but he didn't like this option, because after that the bishop is distracted from the e2 square. And by doing that, my bishop will just enter and sit on c4. And it's so difficult to get this pawn in motion again. And black has just a perfect blockade on the queen side. Meanwhile, the black pawns on the king side, they are mobile and they might just create some passer in the future. And also my king might have an easier task to support the pawns in the center. Meanwhile, the c3 pawn is going nowhere. And he didn't like that. So he felt under kind of some pressure here. But with the pressure, he made some mistake and he didn't go for this best line, but instead he took on d5, and after bishop d5, it's already more critical than it was before, because now I threaten this pawn, but I do not only threaten the g2 pawn, but also the a2 pawn, because after king a2 there is rook d2, regaining the bishop. Also, again, this rook to d1, it wouldn't save the pawn because my rook is protected, it's not really pinned, and I could even give the check first and then take the pawn. Both is better for black already. So he decided to play f3, but I won a pawn now and I had the better chances here. So now it came all down to converting this pawn. I need to take a bit of care that I don't end up in some opposite color bishop ending, for example, which might be still quite drawish. But things worked out quite well in the next moves for me. I rerouted my knight, forking, and thus he cannot really step into the discovery. Thus he must trade his bishop, and I kind of cut his bishop pair into two halves. Now everything was going fine. I played g5, preventing some h4 stuff, and then I brought my king over to the queen side, trying to defend my weakest spots. After rook a5, I panicked a bit with rook d6 in time trouble. I could just have continued king c7, and after rook here, just go to b8. The rook has nowhere to go and I'm very stable. I might kick the rook out later. Maybe consider something like this, followed by b6. Looks quite dangerous for white, where to go with the rook. So, yeah, there are a lot of ideas, but instead I went rook to d6, which had the issue that he might play b5 and then get some counterplay because the a file opens up, and also against my b7 pawn there might be some counterplay. But he didn't take his chance and played c5 instead, after which I could play rook to d4. And now after this sequence I was in time to protect the b7 with my bishop, and I was in time to put the bishop to c6, cutting off the rook, so there was no real counterplay except bishop to e4, which bishop to b5, what he did in the game. And after that I need to take a little bit of care, because actually not the bishop on c6 is threatened, but the pawn on b7. So I must protect this with my king. But I saw that if he takes, then my king would be ready to activate himself and not being cut off on the 8th rank. Basically the threat is that he will invade here, target my pawn, especially this one on f6, and I might have some trouble if my king needs to go to one of those squares. But king d7 is a very good move. Finally my king will manage to go to e6, protect this pawn, sometimes even become active and take this pawn. So for example, if he went for this check here, I could just go up. If he hits this pawn, I can defend. And if he then hits this pawn, I can defend with the rook and finally win a second pawn. And the game is basically over. So he didn't do this. He defended in a better way, which was, he, after king d7, played rook to b6, which is a good waiting move because it prevents me from activating my king because the c6 pawn would drop. Now I could and should have won in several ways. I think more or less easiest is to do something like g4. Maybe, yeah, just immediately g4. It opens up the position and gives me some targets. Still, what I did in the game was still fine for the next few moves. I played rook a4 after quite some thought, trying to target some of those pawns here. But he responded rook to b2, and here I did something which you usually should not do, which is discard some variations too quickly because you're shocked, because you don't like one idea. What you should always do is try to make your idea work anyway, try to concentrate, play the move you really want to play. And the move I, of course, really wanted to play is king to e6. But I thought it would actually not work because there is rook to d2. And this threat here is quite annoying and I might be in trouble. And otherwise I would immediately have played king e6 because it's so ideal to put the king to d5. He cannot stop it in any other way than rook d2. And afterwards I just win my second pawn. But actually there was a solution after rook d2, which is rook to d4. And the point is that the pawn ending is just losing, so he cannot trade. And if he cannot trade, he would retreat, and then I can play king d5 anyway. But the key is just here, my king will invade. King f4 is on the cards, and if g3 I have h4, and then I will invade, and black is winning. So this would have been easiest. I missed this chance. And I will miss more than this one single chance in the game. And we will see, yeah, what I could have done better. So I first tried to keep the control with rook d4, correcting the seemingly mistake. Now I played h4, which was probably not ideal. Still g4 is probably better, I guess. h4, rook goes here, and now I attack the pawn, hit the g2 pawn. I needed to do this at some point, and I went into this position where I would drop the c6 pawn, but therefore gain all his kingside pawns. And practically speaking, this should be winning for black. Black is getting just a lot of pawns, and there might have been cleaner ways, but actually this would have been enough. But the big problem was I was getting low on time, and I was getting also scared that he gets a lot of play here. After rook d1 though, things were winning for black, but I messed it up because I couldn't calculate the stuff till the end. Here still things are fine, but now I should have played something like king to f4. e3 still fine, but making things a bit more complicated than they needed to be. Still, it was all winning here if I found in this position after takes the move g4, which I didn't. And after king e3, the game soon ended in a draw. I just could not make the progress here. After my king went to g2, he attacked the pawn. I need to sacrifice it, otherwise I cannot make progress. I did it this way, but he gave this intermediate check and took the pawn with a check. And my two pawns, they are not enough because, yeah, he slows them down and then his king will join in and he will be making the draw. I tried h3, h2 and blocking the white king, but it was not so great because he attacked my pawn and the white king came in anyway. I finally decided to take the rook off and force the draw. So that was it. The end was a bit sad for me because I was basically better all the game after I won the pawn, and then I just failed in the conversion phase. And for you, I want to give this advice: really try to focus in this phase, not to get low on time. Try to focus to play the moves you really want to play. I really want to point out this moment here where I could have gone king e6 because the c6 pawn was no longer hanging, but I didn't do it for some reason which was not actually not working, and this would definitely have improved, because if I win the second pawn, it's just over, and all I need to do is to go a bit deeper into this line and really try to make it work. Then it would have been over. Yes, thanks for watching. I hope you could take away some stuff from the opening and from the endgame, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.